So we can go ahead and you can introduce yourself, Bailey, if you don't mind. I don't have your
Yeah,
bio,
perfect.
so
Yes, awesome. All right. Well, first off, yeah, thank you all so much for coming, and also thank you for having me. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Bailey Schroeder. I am one of the co-founders and the CEO of Petcademy. Just a bit more on my background. So I have more than a decade of experience building technology, both in the animal welfare, animal rescue shelter space, also in startup tech. I lived in New York City for 15 years, and then San Francisco, working in larger tech. But have kind of that background, bringing that to Petcademy. I am also a product management coach at Stanford, where I work with younger individuals who are younger and older, actually, individuals who are looking to transition into product management, so building software and kind of coaching them through that process. And lastly, this little guy here. So this is Harry. This is a Chow Chow that I adopted in 2018, and he's kind of the inspiration behind Petcademy. So I got him from a rescue. They had found him as a stray. He was humongously puffy and matted in a field in Long Island. But after being in a foster home, an incredible foster home, I would say for 8 months, I adopted him. And when I brought him home, he had quite a few, we'll say, behavioral issues. Much of it stemming from fear, fear of people, fear of places, fear of things. Very reactive, very, very hesitant to be handled in any capacity. And I ended up working with a veterinary behaviorist in New York. One of the benefits of living in New York City, that there is one there, and this dog training school called School for the Dogs, where again I got that support to help me navigate through some of these behavioral issues that Harry was experiencing. And it was incredible for us both, because I got this window into, hey, when someone is experiencing pulling on leash, when their dog's reactive, what are the things that we can kind of share with them to help them feel empowered to solve that issue, or manage that issue. But what it also, we'll say, brought to my attention was just how related behavioral issues are to surrenders. So in 2020, the University of Denver put out a study where they looked at how many behavioral or how many surrenders are related to behavior. And for cats, it was 34.7%. So this is more than a third of all cats being brought into the shelter was a result of a behavioral issue that the pet parent was having with the cat. Now, when it came to dogs, it was even higher. It's 55.9% of the owner surrenders were related to behavior. So behavior is a thing that is very, very, we'll say, tied to surrenders, something that pet parents are working through, and something that we want to be kind of cognizant about, and really where we saw an opportunity to help in terms of Petcademy. So our very high level vision is really to try to create this world where animals aren't being surrendered because of behavioral problems. And especially because of behavioral problems that have very straightforward solutions that we can potentially provide those pet parents. So to give more context into what we do, which will help set the stage for some of the data that I'm going to talk about, is really what we do at Petcademy, so about Petcademy. So at Petcademy, we're providing pet parents with 30 days of behavioral support. So we support adopters, we support fosters, and we also support pet parents within the community who are considering surrendering, particularly as part of managed intake programs. But we give them the 30 days of support to, again, help them navigate whatever it is that's going on with their dog or with their cat. Our team is comprised of certified trainers and behavioral consultants. Everyone is fear-free, positive reinforcement-based only. None of the recommendations we provide are punishment-based or use aversive techniques. It's also worth calling out that we work with shelters and rescues across the US, Canada, and Australia, and we actually have 3 partners in Virginia. Compassion Animal Rescue, Henrico Humane, and Friends of Homeless Animals. So at Petcademy, we support all these pet parents when they bring their animals home. So we think about adopters and we think about fosters. And this puts us in a really, really unique position because we have visibility into what pet parents are asking or they're not sure what to do with when they bring an animal home. We have visibility into the behavioral challenges they're facing. We have visibility into some of just the curiosities that they have about their pet. Again, some of these pet parents having never potentially adopted before, never having a cat, never having a dog. So the range of questions we get is very vast. But if we look at some of these examples here, we have our friend Jenna over here who's just asking us how I get my cat to stay out of my Christmas tree. And then we have Zachary over here who's adopted a puppy, and that puppy is chewing on, we'll say everything, but for the context of this question, wires and shoes. And Zachary's also asking, hey, how do I train her to use a crate? She hates the crate, but how can I make this happen? And then lastly, we have a question here from Sarah that maybe isn't totally a question. It's more like a, oh, I'm feeling exhausted and just needing that support, that reassurance that, hey, having a rambunctious puppy is pretty normal. And being tired is normal, but we can kind of help you navigate this moment and help tire your pup out. So in terms of the agenda for today, I want to talk about three kind of big buckets of things. And I'll also say that us saying to you, oh, pet parents have tons of questions probably is not a surprise. And so when we think about what we're going to talk about today, it's number one, what are the common behavioral questions? So of the tens of thousands of questions that our team has fielded over the past few years, what is the most common question that pet parents are asking? And then the next piece is reviewing how to answer these questions. So again, our team focuses exclusively on positive reinforcement-based training. So the recommendations that I'm going to provide are a reflection of that philosophy. And I'm also going to make this deck available afterwards so that y'all have some of these recommendations and resources at your fingertips, thereby being able to kind of implement these strategies and this information at your shelter, at your rescue. And the last piece is a strategy. So how can we take this knowledge of, hey, people ask these common. Oh, can you put yourself on mute unless you're asking a question? Sorry. Thanks. But the last piece is really around the strategy. So, hey, if we know that people ask these questions all the time, and we know that this is how we should be answering them, what's our strategy for actually deploying that support to the pet parents at our organization, and especially when we have limited time and limited budget? So the first section here is dog parents. So I'd love if you can put in the chat, let's see if I can find the chat, what you think are the most common behavioral questions from dog parents. And feel free to just kind of put anything into the chat. I'm just curious to see if y'all have any guesses. We think it's chewing on wires, house training, housebreaking. Okay. Other ideas? I'll say your yep. Reactivity, crate training, nipping, barking. Yeah. Reactivity, destruction of things, barking. Yes, these are all questions that we get a lot of. Separation anxiety. Yeah, cat with the litter box. Yeah, we'll get to cats in a second, but this is a good one for cats as well. Dogs fighting. We'll say dogs not getting along. Yep, definitely. Awesome. Yes. Okay. So with that in mind, so these are all great guesses and ideas. So let's look at the top 4 reasons or behavioral questions that we get. So the fourth most common topic of questions we get is related to anxiety. So this is separation anxiety. Eating out of the cat's litter box, that happens too, yes. But anxiety is related to, yes, separation anxiety. So pet parent leaves, dog cries, dog scratches at door, Dog tries to break out of door. Dog tries to escape. It's also things like displacement behaviors where, hey, I'm licking my paw, like I'm feeling this general level of anxiety, and I'm participating in kind of like self-destructive behavior to try to release those feelings of anxiety. So those questions represent 9% of all of the questions we get related to dogs. The third most common is multi-dog households. So I forget who it was that guessed the dogs fighting. So yeah, 9%, a little over 9% of the questions we get are related to households that have 2 or more dogs, and the dogs are not getting along with each other. The second most common bucket is leash walking. And I want to say that this actually excludes leash reactivity. We break that out separately on our end. And leash walking, a lot of it is, hey, my dog is pulling on the leash. It's, hey, my dog is not feeling a collar, is not feeling a leash. It's never worn a harness. How do I get them more comfortable? It's, hey, I'm taking my dog out for a walk and he's plopping on the ground. He's not moving.
All right, thanks.
Oh,
Bye.
sorry, can you mute? Thanks. It's he's planting and not proceeding on the walk. So this kind of spectrum of questions related to, hey, I'm trying to walk I would like to walk my dog, but something is kind of getting in the way to make this not the experience I was expecting when it comes to walking. And the most common question we get is house training. So I think the first 4 guests that were in the chat were house training. So good job. And this was really interesting to me because we provide support to dogs of all ages, right? It's not just little puppies that are just kind of beginning that house training journey. And we do support those. So that is a part of it, but there's also older dogs, right? There's dogs that are adolescent dogs and they have visitors that come over to the house and they're so excited and then they pee on the floor. There's the dogs that go out for a walk and their pet parents are like, oh, I just took him out for 45 minutes. We came back and he pooped as soon as we got in the house. There's those situations. And then there's even house training questions that are related to, hey, my dog got spayed, my dog got neutered. Everything is settling in. And then we're seeing an accident after surgery. So these are kind of the buckets of major questions that we get. In terms of surprises, so based on some of the guesses, I would say you're probably not totally surprised. Not totally surprised by this list. And to me, I feel when I pulled this data, I felt initial just kind of optimism, I would say, because of these 4 buckets, I would say anxiety is like probably the most challenging of the different behaviors to manage. And a lot of the anxiety, which we try to really parse out on our end, is like, hey, there's real separation anxiety, right? We're talking destruction and it's kind of a high severity situation. And then there's more of like the general anxiety of, hey, I'm in a new place, I don't know where I am. And that's like natural that we see kind of dissipate as the animal gets more comfortable. But that aside, I would say these other 3 feel very solvable. Like we can give pet parents information to set them up for success, empower them to be able to manage some of these challenges that they're facing. So overall, definitely optimistic based on the volume of questions that we receive. What I wanted to do next is just kind of go through some of the recommendations that we make related to these categories. Again, the goal isn't for everyone to retain everything I'm going to say necessarily, kind of just like let it wash over you. If you have questions, please like put them in the chat, yell them out. We can pause. We have lots of time to talk. I'm going to distribute this deck afterwards, but wanted to just kind of talk through some of the recommendations that we make high level. So these are all real life examples. They're all animals that we supported, real photos of the animals that were adopted, the questions from pet parents that we actually received. So related to anxiety, Clarissa, adopted Bandit, and wanted to just understand like, hey, how can I help Bandit when I leave the house? Bandit's barking, they're uncomfortable when I leave. So when we think about making kind of baseline level recommendations to pet parents related to anxiety, the first thing is creating a predictable schedule. The animal is coming into a new home. they're not really sure where they are. They're not really sure who you are. Creating that predictable schedule of walking, feeding, playtime really can kind of bring down that baseline anxiety. Just like us as humans like to have some predictability, animals are exactly the same, maybe even more so. The next recommendation we make is really to be mindful of alone time. So if a dog is not comfortable being left alone, really try to gradually increase the time that they are alone. Really make them feel like, okay, you're going, but you're coming back. And also pairing those departures with something the dog loves. So that might be a Kong with frozen peanut butter in it. So it's something that, oh, this is delicious and fun. Also taking their mind off of the idea that you're leaving and starting to build that association of like, hey, when mom or dad leaves, I get something awesome. And extra bonus, I feel pretty confident they're coming back. The next piece is just managing the environment. So when we think about a new dog being brought into a home, it's like, wow, I have all this space, and space can actually make you feel more anxious. So using a crate, if the dog is happy to use a crate, or a baby gate to kind of say, okay, this is your kind of safe, more contained area in the house, can help them again feel a bit more comfortable when they're left alone. Also recommend to people, if possible, to incorporate music and potentially white noise. And so when I think about music, it's not like rock music, like it's nice, calming. We're trying to create a spa-like environment. And these tips can really, again, help bring down the baseline level of anxiety and help the animal settle in faster. The next piece is around dogs not getting along. So Elizabeth adopted a dog named Bear. I love Bear. I think his face is so cute. But Bear was having troubles with his brother, his new canine brother. And so Elizabeth reached out to us for help, and we had a lot of back and forth with her. Eventually, I can say that the adoption was successful. The animals are still in the house. Everything is seems to be all good. They're still together. But when we think about dogs not getting along, the big thing, and I'm sure a lot of you kind of talk about this with adopters in pre-adoption counseling, is like rushing introductions. So by the time it gets to us, they've already been introduced, right? The pet parent may or may not have been told to keep the dog separated. They may have not understood how long to keep them separated. But the recommendations that we make when, okay, they're together, they're not getting along, is let's take a step back in the process, kind of separate them, and we're going to reintroduce them slowly, and we're going to not let them be together until we know that it can be done safely. And part of this, once there is this baseline level of kind of familiarity, confidence, comfort between the dogs, is starting to do this idea of tandem walks. And again, this, if we imagine a street, one dog on one side, one dog on the other side, each with a human walking, and as they get comfortable over time, it's kind of like getting closer, bringing them together, offering rewards throughout those tandem walks, so the dogs start to build those associations of like, oh, when I'm walking with my brother over there, I'm receiving tasty treats. He's not that bad. And again, over time, that association gets stronger, they get more comfortable. It's a nice way to really integrate them slowly. The next thing we recommend is paired relaxation exercises. So again, I have a link to our lesson on this that's in the deck, but the idea really is that we're going to have the animals in separate spaces. Again, ideally with one human with animal one and one human with animal two, and just working on kind of settling in. So we're in the same space, we're not together, but it's okay. And using things like rewards, practicing go to mat, but building up this idea that, hey, in the presence of one another, we can chill. And then the last thing we recommend, which is true honestly for most dogs long after they go into a household, is providing resources such as food, toys, twos separately. Because as we know, it's very natural and normal and makes sense as to why a dog would guard a resource. And if we provide those resources separately with no reason to guard or no opportunity to guard from another dog, you can kind of get ahead of these issues. And so resource guarding, again, being one of the main things that dogs get bent out of shape about, is to me a very preventable situation through space management. The next one is leash walking. So again, people ask us a lot of questions. What an adjustable leash? No, we do not want them to use an adjustable, retractable leash. But again, people just not knowing anything about how to walk a dog on the leash, but they do know they don't want them, for example, to not pull. So we recommend that the pet parents use a non-retractable leash. They use that front clip harness if we're talking about pulling. We also recommend that they practice walking inside without any distraction. So like any other skill, the easier we make the skill, or the easier the environment we make the skill, the higher the likelihood that they'll be able to build those baseline behaviors and bring them into more challenging environments. So it's walking in the house, and then within the house, in those practice moments, it's encouraging and rewarding the dog for walking in the magic zone, which is kind of like that circle around your body. With this idea of, again, building that association of, hey, when I'm walking, if I'm paying attention to mom or I'm checking in with dad, I'm getting good things. So it's in my best interest to stay kind of close to my parent. And again, we have a lesson here that is linked out in the deck that I'll distribute after. And the last piece is house training. So again, I think we had so many people say that I guess that house training would be the number one issue that we deal with, and it is. But let me jump into some of the recommendations that we make. So similar to what we talked about with anxiety, it's consistent schedule. So creating that consistent schedule so the dog understands or starts to understand, like, hey, I think I'm going to go out for a pee in a few hours or in some period of time that feels okay to me. But also giving them lots of opportunities to go if they are struggling with house training, or if it is a younger dog, really giving them lots of opportunities to go outside to be successful, and pee or poop in the right place. The next recommendation we provide is around reducing the area that you need to monitor. So again, it's all kind of similar to the anxiety recommendation as well. And we really think about space management as a nice tool to use in so many different situations. But when it comes to house training and space management, reducing that area you need to monitor. So let's say you're working at your desk. I'm in an Airbnb here, and I'm in a bedroom. My dog is here with me. The likelihood that he can kind of scatter away and go pee in a corner is almost none, because we're sharing a space. I can be more attuned to the idea of, if he starts to prance, oh, okay, that's a signal to me that we need to go outside. So smaller the area, the easier it is to pick up on those signals and take your dog out. The next piece is rewarding. So when I say rewarding, the easiest way to reward a dog is food, right? But there's lots of other ways to do it as well. I just wanted to call that out. So depending on the dog, like heavy praise might really do it do it for that particular dog. But when it comes to house training, rewarding the dog after they pee in the right spot, not when they're doing it. We don't want to distract them, but the moment it's over, really doubling down on, oh, such a good boy, here's a treat. Such a good girl, here's a treat. And then lastly, using an enzyme cleaner to clean up any accidents that happen, because if they can't smell the pee, the likelihood is reduced that they will go in the same place twice. But lots of information, but fear not, I will distribute this, and there are lessons that you can link out to. But before I get into the cats, does anyone have any questions that they wanted to ask related to any of the information covered so far? And feel free to put it in the chat or even shout it out. Okay, then we shall continue. So the same question as before, but related to cats. What do we think are some of the most common questions that we get from cat adopters and also from cat fosters? Litter box issues. Yep, that is definitely a popular question. Other ideas? Yep, litter box issues. Hiding. Yep, scratching furniture. Yep. Getting along with other pets, cats. Yep. Yeah, intros to other cats. Kind of related to getting along with other cats. Definitely a strong connection between those two. Intros to dogs. Yep, get those questions as well. From the dog perspective, we get my dog is chasing my cat. How do I get how do I get my dog to stop doing this? Any other ideas before I kind of reveal some of the top questions that we get from cat adopters and fosters? Okay. Then the most common questions we get. So number 4 is hiding. Aggression, yes. That's also a good one. It will actually come up, spoiler alert. So number 4 is fear and hiding. So this is questions where the pet parent is telling us that, hey, I've brought my cat home. They're hiding. They won't come out from under the bed. They'll only come out when I go to bed. When I'm watching TV, there's nowhere for the cat to be found. But as soon as I leave the house, I can see on my camera that they're walking around. The number 3, third most common that we get is related to litter box questions. So honestly, before I pulled this data, I would have thought this was a bit higher in the list of common items, but it is number 3. So when we think of litter box questions, it's cats eliminating in the wrong place or not in the litter box. Cat is eliminating potentially in the plants. We get pet parents that are like, my cat is really, really messy with their litter box. So that's the question that we get. They're throwing litter on the floor. I don't want to have a house that's full of litter. What do I do? Then we get aggression as the number 2 most common question from pet parents. And so this is instances where pet parent is like, hey, I was petting my cat Winston. He bit me. Hey, I was petting I was trying to pick up my cat Elvis. He bit me. I was walking past Elvis and he starts swatting at my ankles and biting at my calves. It's a lot of his predatory behaviors, I would say. I would say natural predatory behaviors that pet parents are reaching out to us about when it comes to aggression. And the most common question we get, this, to be honest with you, was a shock to me, is cats not getting along. So this is any pet parent that has 2 or more cats in the house and is reporting to us that some or all of them are not getting along. Now, why this was particularly interesting to me is because, again, we support a ton of cat adoptions, a ton of cat fosters. And while a lot of times pet parents have another cat in the house, it's not all the time. So the frequency at which this question is coming up is like disproportionate to the number of kind of adoptions and foster situations that we're seeing. And again, what this category represents is just the pet parent saying in some capacity that these cats are not getting along with one another. But yeah, I will say also very good guesses when we kind of came into this slide. I think all of these were on the list in some capacity. So with that in mind, going to do the same exercise as we did with the dogs and just talking through kind of how we think about handling a lot of these questions that we get from pet parents. So fear, number 4, which we also just say hiding because it's always hiding. So this pet parent, Tamara, has adopted a cat named Foxy. Foxy's really shy. She's hiding. And this pet parent, they're not saying, oh, this is, I'm mad about this behavior. It's really their comments and their questions are really coming from a place of like, hey, I want this cat to feel safe. I want them to feel like everything is okay. And we are now their people. So when we think about supporting these pet parents and why we really want to be like, we want to be really deliberate with all of the recommendations that we give. But when it comes to fear and hiding, where the issue comes in is when the pet parent feels like, oh, my cat's hiding, they're afraid, they don't like me, we're not bonding. So a big part of kind of getting them out of that headspace is really reviewing everyone's probably favorite rule, the 3-3-3 rule, and like what you can kind of expect and what a transition typically will look like for a cat or even or a dog coming into the home, and that it's normal. Hiding is normal. And that we want to reinforce to them that, hey, this is really normal behavior. Don't force them out of their safe space. Wherever they're hiding, it's okay. Reinforce the moments that they socialize with you. So similar to what we talked about with dogs and providing rewards, like if they socialize even for a few seconds, reward that behavior. Toss them a delicious cat treat, even if they're only poking their heads out and they're still 20 feet away from you, like toss it in that direction, right? And really help them start to build the association that when they are with you, when they're in the home, good things happen. So this is how we think about talking, or we'll say supporting pet parents or talking about their cats hiding and their cats being afraid when they are coming into the house. The next is litter box. So as I mentioned, we get questions that just like span the globe on litter box, but this pet parent asking us, hey, my cat wasn't able, will they be able to find the litter box on their own? And I share this as an example because I feel like it's a less obvious question in terms of what we would expect to get. A lot of the questions we get are like, oh, my cat is not using litter box. They're peeing in my bathtub. They're peeing on the floor. But we, again, kind of span the globe in terms of the different questions that people have related to litter box and litter box training. And when we think about particularly a cat not eliminating in the litter box, the first thing we say to them is really we want to confirm that there isn't a medical issue, because a lot of times, like as we all know, cats with litter boxes, oftentimes if they're not using it, something might be amiss, and we want to make sure that there isn't a medical issue. Next piece is placing the litter boxes in low traffic, easily accessible areas of the home. So that, again, it's not a high traffic foot area where cat might need to go to the bathroom, but there's always distractions. They're not feeling comfortable because there's too much foot traffic. So you want to put it in a place that's easily accessible and quiet. The next piece is having enough litter boxes. So we do recommend, when possible, having one litter box per cat plus an extra. And so if you had one cat, that'd be 2 litter boxes. If you had 2 cats, it'd be 3. 3 cats, it'd be 4 litter boxes. We also talk about cleanliness as being really important for cats. And so, and if it's not a clean litter box, they may just not want to use it. So talking about, hey, we recommend scooping the litter box every day, deep cleaning it every 2 weeks. And then if an accident happens where the cat is eliminating outside of the litter box, really use an enzyme cleaner to clean up that accident to help reduce the likelihood that it happens again. Next is aggression. So this pet parent here, Bill, adopted a cat named Cheddar. And this is Cheddar is biting Bill and scratching him, and he's bleeding every day. This is kind of a more severe example of aggression. But this pet parent just wants to know, how do I make this behavior stop? And so when I think about aggression, I really think a lot about like the educational component with humans, with pet parents, in terms of like, not all cat parents understand, especially new ones, that not a lot of cats want to be picked up. And a lot of cats don't want to be pet by someone they don't know. And even though the human has all the best intentions for the cat and for their relationship, the cat doesn't really know that yet. So we need to give them time. We really need to reinforce to them that, hey, don't force your cat to interact with you. Allow them to come to you for attention. If they are interested in being pet, right, then keep those petting sessions short. Do a bit of petting, pause. Does it look like that your cat Winston is enjoying the pet? If it's yes, okay, maybe we can keep going, provide a reward while we're doing it. If not, okay, take a pause, let Winston run off. And again, make sure that Winston is feeling like, hey, I have control over when I do and don't want to be pet. And that helps build trust between the pet parent, or between the cat and the pet parent. The next piece is around, we'll say, outlets for predatory behavior. So we know that cats are predators, and this is natural, and they have natural behaviors that align with this. They stuck in the wild, they would stalk things, they would hunt things, and we need to give them outlets for that behavior. So it's talking to those pet parents about, hey, what you're experiencing is normal. Your cat is trying to hunt. And by playing with them in the morning and the evening when they have their most energy, and using things like feather wands and other play items to help them get out those behaviors, get and satisfy that desire, we will then reduce the moments where they're swatting at your ankles, because those are moments when, again, they're trying to exert those natural behaviors of hunting. And yeah, so this, like, to me, aggression for the most part, and obviously there are instances where that fall outside of what I'm going to say, but I think a lot of times with aggression, it really is sharing with the pet parent of like, let the cat come to you. Give them the outlets to play, and this simple advice, and just letting them know that, hey, that is the best way to kind of approach life with a cat, can help resolve so many of these aggression related questions and issues. And the last one here is cats not getting along. So again, this represented a quarter, I think, of all the questions that we get from cat parents. And it's a version of this every single time. My one cat is having a difficult time adjusting to my other cat. And similar to dogs, a lot of times this is the product of rushed introductions. And so when the question comes to us, when it always comes to us once they've already been introduced, it's again taking that step back. We're going to separate them and then we're going to reintroduce them slowly to make sure everybody's comfortable, and doing things like the blanket swapping, room swapping, getting them familiar with one another, even when they can't see each other, the scent, the presence, to eventually again slowly bring them into that healthy relationship in the home. And what's also important is, and this is important for dogs too, is really just moving at the pace of the slower animal. So in a perfect world, let's say both cats feeling the same way at the same time. Okay, easy, right? But a lot of times one cat will be a little more hesitant, the other will be a bit more comfortable, but really kind of tethering your thoughts to the cat that is feeling less comfortable, to make sure that we're always bringing them along and not rushing them through the process. Next piece is separate resources. We talked a little bit about this a second ago, but when they are separated, or even after they are kind of living, we'll say, harmoniously together in the same household, giving them areas where they have food, or they have water, where they have their litter boxes, so they can have the sense of personal space. And then lastly, rewarding through every encounter. So this is particularly relevant when we are in that kind of introduction, everyone getting comfortable phase, where even if they're on the other side of the door, giving each cat kind of a reward to help solidify in their mind, oh, like my brother, I'm not too sure about him, but I'm starting to get these delicious treats every time we're together. So maybe he's not too bad. And again, building on that over time. And again, depending on the cat, depending on what they find rewarding, might be food, might be play, might be something, you speaking in the most high-pitched voice you can possibly conjure up. Whatever the cat finds is rewarding is a reward, and that is what we are going to use. Well, let me pause. Any questions related to the cat content that we talked about, or anything that has come to the mind since I asked last time? Okay. All right, then I'm going to show you this kind of, we'll say, more general overlay of the question. So I went through the top 4 buckets for dogs and cats. So I wanted to just show you kind of what else we track and call out something important. So what I presented was the frequency of the questions. And what you're seeing here is the frequency of the questions. But what it's not accounting for is severity, right? So things like, I'll say, topics like leash reactivity, topics like aggression, these happen less frequently, but they're harder for the pet parent to manage. It can be more challenging for them to feel like, oh, this is something that I can or am willing to work on with my dog. Similar with aggression, right? It's exact same thing. There's a lot of effort that goes in both on the pet parent side and even on our side, and I'm sure on your side as well. Like the questions and calls that you get, leash reactivity, those conversations can take a lot longer than questions about leash walking, if people even call in about leash walking. But the positive, I think, about this is when you think about frequency. So if you have a good strategy for, like, we'll say some of these lesser severity issues, we'll say things where you can give pet parents a list of action items and tips to help them, again, feel empowered to take those steps in their home. If you got that for the more straightforward questions, that frees you up to have more bandwidth to deal with the more challenging, higher severity issues, the ones that take longer, that might need additional resources, such as leash reactivity and aggression. So punchline is, we want a strategy for the high frequency, easier to handle questions. Now, building a strategy. Okay. So when I think about building a strategy for, we'll say behavior and pet parents, and ultimately how do we keep the animals into the home? And I think these tips are also relevant for fosters as well. But the first bucket is really pre-adoption counseling. So whether you do it right now, you don't do it right now, you sort of do something in the middle, we definitely want to do pre-adoption counseling. And so part of that is, number one, discussing the home environment. So do they have another pet in the home? And if they do, great. Let's reinforce this idea of slow introductions and kind of taking things in stride. The next piece is around decompression. The decompression is a real thing for animals, that the 3-3-3 rule, what they should expect in the early days, and kind of how to create that environment to help the animal feel more comfortable more quickly in their new home. The next piece is around setting expectations and disclosing any known behavior issues. So if you know that the dog has been struggling in its foster home with leash walking, it pulls a lot, it's a really good moment to tell that adopter, right? Because I think that having that knowledge makes it less of a shock when things like walking happen, or if the issue is, an accidents here and there with house training. The more they know in advance, the least shocked they'll be, the less discrepancy between expectation and reality we will see. And also when it comes to behaviors, like when it comes to setting expectations, if you think about cats, hey, it's normal. The hiding is normal. You may see some different unexpected behaviors as your cat is settling, as your dog is settling. Maybe they were super jazzed in the shelter, but when you get them home, they're more quiet, they're more reserved, they're not totally sure about you. Like, this is normal. It's a transition. The next piece is around providing materials to tackle common issues related, we'll say, to the species or age of the animal, and anything specific to the animal. So, for example, if we know that the dog has been struggling with house training, we may want to give them a printout that they can take home with them to be able to refer back to it and be like, okay, like these are the steps that I want to take. And then the last piece is establishing clear communication channels. So what this means is, when the animal is leaving, when they're going from the shelter or the foster home into the adopter home, or going from the shelter into the foster home, or transitioning foster homes, letting that pet parent know, like, hey, if you have a question, this is where you should send it. Is it a phone call? If it is, what's the phone number? It's not to any of your adoption counselors or team. It's like, where is that call going? If it's an email, making that very, very clear to them. Because again, just the knowledge of having access to help, I think, can really help us as people feel a little bit more in control in the moments where things are just not meeting expectations potentially. So this is what I recommend related to pre-adoption counseling. And I will say that in a perfect world, pre-adoption counseling is all that pet parents need. But in reality, it's not. We know that when they are bringing the animal home, when they're adopting, like, oh my God, I'm so excited. I just can't wait to get the animal home. And there's so much information. And like, if you imagine you say 10 things, maybe they retain one of them, right? This is just normal. It's just too much happening, information overload. This is why I strongly recommend, in addition to pre-adoption counseling, is post-adoption support. So I have 5 kind of recommendations here. The first being proactively reaching out 2 to 3 days after the adoption happens. So the reason I say 2 to 3 days is, I think it was last year that it was last fall, UPenn published a study where they essentially said that when a pet parent brings a newly adopted animal into their home, that they start to become cognizant of, we'll say, behavioral issues 2 days after they bring the animal home. And so the way that I interpret that is, like, I brought the animal home, I'm so excited, I'm nervous, there's a lot of adrenaline, lots of feelings. We get to day 2, things start to settle down. People start to see the delta between their expectation and reality. I mean, it doesn't mean the animal's doing something wrong at all. It might just mean that the parent thought they would dance by day 2 and they're not, right? Like, it's just the delta between those things. But by proactively reaching out to them, whatever the issue is, you have the opportunity to, like, nip the issue in the bud, I would say. So being there for them before it escalates to the point where they're like, oh, there's no way this dog is going to stop chewing my shoes, right? So it's on day 2 or 3, reaching out to them. How are things going with your newly adopted dog, Bruce? The second is automating that outreach. So there's email tools that exist where essentially you can have communications go out based on triggers. So you could say, hey, 2 days after this pet parent's email comes into our system, please send this other email that asks them, hey, how are things going? Right. And there's tools like, if you're familiar or not, and happy to answer questions about this also if anyone has them, but tools like MailChimp, tools like Constant Contact. There's ways to kind of move the information from your shelter management software into MailChimp and then create these automations off of it. And if you do it once, it's kind of a set and forget, right? You have those automated outreaches to pet parents, and you don't have to think about it, but you know that you're going to be made aware if an issue comes up in that new home. The third point is around creating draft responses for the most common questions. So if we think about this, so imagine you're an airline for a second, and there's a bunch of flight delays because of terrible weather. Every time a traveler reaches out to the airline, they're not rewriting their response, right? These are drafted, pre-drafted responses that are going out, right? A person is hitting send, and this pre-drafted response is made for them. What I'm suggesting is taking the same approach. So when you kind of, and again, there's a lot of information in this deck that you can kind of pull from if you want to create these responses yourself, but have a document that's shared amongst your team. You can use Google Docs or something that's the equivalent, so that whoever is answering these pet parent questions, whether it's over email, which I do recommend email versus phone, it doesn't take as long, that they have access to it. So it's, maybe there's a customized introduction where we're like acknowledging what the pet parent is feeling, and whatever nuance it is that's associated with their message. But the core recommendation is copy and paste, send it out. And again, when we think about like the frequency of questions related to like house training, related to leash walking, like these are points that you don't need to reinvent the wheel every time the question comes in. Right? It's like showing empathy to the pet parent, and it's providing them with strategies that number one, they can understand, that are straightforward, and that they can implement on their end. The next piece is establishing a dedicated location to receive these questions. So personally, I really, really like to think about things like, how do you improve efficiency? Right? And so part of that is not being interrupted. And this applies to like many different parts of life, but there's a stat that's like, if someone interrupts you twice over the course of an hour, like you don't really get anything done because your mind is going in a million places. So if you think of how this relates to establishing a dedicated location, if you said, hey, we are going to set up a dedicated email address to receive any questions that adopters have related to their animals, or any fosters have related to their animals, and I'm only going to look at this at these specific times of the day. And that might be all day, right? But you have more control as to when you look at it and when you set aside time to respond back to that pet parent, as opposed to getting kind of sporadically pinged with texts in the day, sporadically pinged with calls, getting messages to your personal email that can derail you. So I think this is really effective in terms of thinking about how to just like get the most out of the time that you have, because I know that time is like the most precious resource, and we don't have a ton of extra time. And then the last point is really just partnering with us. So if all of this sounds like a lot, it's what we do at Petcademy. So we basically, within 24 hours of a pet getting adopted, going into a foster home, we set that pet parent up with 30 days of support. We do reach out to them 2 to 3 days after, or 2 days after they bring their animal home. And then do those check-ins. We do a bunch of check-ins over the course of the month, but there's partners like us that can kind of take this lift off your plate. But the key takeaways. So number one, most common questions from dog parents can be addressed with a simple response. And so things like those pre-written answers or recommendations that I talked about. This is a tool that you can leverage to really help them with these most common questions that are coming in from dog parents. When it comes to cats, most common questions are related to multi-cat households, and this is very much a function of rushed introduction. So the more we can do to really double down with pet parents who are adopting a cat and have another cat in the home is a slow introduction. And slow doesn't mean the timeline that you have established of they will be introduced within 2 days. It's, hey, rolling with how the cats are feeling and introducing them to one another slowly. The next is with pet parents proactively setting their expectations and providing resources during that pre-adoption counseling session. So letting them know if there are any behavioral bits and bops that they should be aware of. It's letting them know that, hey, it's normal for cats to hide when they get into their new home. If your dog feels very shy and unsure, like this is very normal. This is normal behavior. So setting those expectations up front, providing them with resources before they get out the door. Accepting that pre-adoption counseling often isn't enough. So as valuable, honestly, as I do believe that it is, it's not everything that we need to provide. I think we really do need to provide post-adoption support to these pet parents. And when it comes to your organization, really implementing a strategy that works for you and your team that effectively and efficiently allows you to receive and respond to the questions that pet parents have, because responding to those and making those pet parents feel supported, I think, is a huge part of keeping pets in the home and making these adoptions and even in foster scenarios more successful. That's it. Do we have questions? Comments? Concerns? All right. Well, I will say that Diana did distribute the list of everyone that is on the call. Oh yeah, shout your question out, Stephanie. Or type it in the chat if that's easier. All right, let's see. Resource guarding, is it I'm not sure if that is anxiety and they can never have a toy together? So when it comes to resource guarding, animals can guard different things, right? They can guard objects. So think of any object. They can guard food, they can guard toys, they can guard people. If you have a dog that is resource guarding toys, if that's kind of the common issue that keeps coming out, then my suggestion, honestly, would be for that pet parent. Because again, when we think about like we're giving people information that they can safely and successfully implement in their home, that if the resource guarding is driven by toys, then I would suggest using space management to give both animals access to toys at specific times. And then that separation kind of removes the instance of or the potential issue of resource guarding because the animals aren't together with the resource. That would be the recommendation that I would give the pet parent in that situation. But again, when we talk to who've done everything suggesting are still having issues with their cats not getting along. Yeah, it's a good question. So to be fully transparent, so our team, like we have a couple of team members who have a ton of experience with cats, and then other team members with more experience with different dog issues. So on a team level, our team will kind of like discuss the situation that's being raised and figure out what the best next step is. So when it comes to cats not getting along, like I think there is a reality of some cats are never going to get along, right? And like you are going to need the pet parent would need to take steps potentially forever to keep the cat separated, to keep them safe. And so part of that conversation with our team and with that pet parent is to be honest about that, right? Like it's like just because you're it's inconvenient, I would say, to have to keep the cat separated doesn't mean that that inconvenience will result in them getting along, right? So there is kind of a conversation there on, is this the best situation for the cats and you as a pet parent, what you feel like you can reasonably manage. And so we kind of will work on our end to talk the pet parent through that. But yeah, I think the reality is that sometimes it's not. Oh, can't get off mute with a specific foster. But yeah, so that's in terms of cats not getting along. I think we try to present the pet parent with recommendations, and also like not lie to them, right? Not say, hey, if you do this, we promise it will be okay in a month. Like it might take 3 months, like it might take longer, it might take it may need additional kind of support moving forward, and we try to have those conversations with pet parents. In terms of subscriptions to rescues, so the way that we kind of work with shelters and rescues is that we don't do it on we don't say, okay, we'll support for one animal. Basically what we do is we'll connect directly into the shelter management system. And then in the kind of full-fledged solution, what we do is for every adopter, we give that adopter 30 days of support. And then we see what the organization does is kind of market that the animal comes with 30 days of Petcademy support. And that can help the pet parents kind of feel more confident to bring the adopted animal into their home, but it goes out to all adopters. Similarly with fosters, it's the same thing. Every foster parent, as soon as the animal moves stages in the shelter management system, that foster parent and that animal kind of get those 30 days of support. And when it comes to fosters, because we do see and want serial fosters, they'll get kind of that support window with every pairing that they have, but we don't do it on a per kind of animal basis. And the reason is, if we think about like human insurance, right? Like medical insurance, it's like if we only ever supported the individual animals, like we wouldn't be a viable company. We would not be able to do it because every animal would require so much support. But what I would say in this situation is that people can get annual memberships with us. And so if you wanted to like really support something, one specific situation, I would say email me and can kind of like figure something out, but we don't do that. We don't let people cherry pick. It's kind of like all of your animals get support per care type or per species. So other questions? Yeah, of course. No problem. All right. Let's see. And I'll show you actually, since we have a couple of minutes and more for curiosity's sake, if you're curious, so when it comes to the shelters and rescues that we work with, every group gets a dashboard like this, and it's all your data. So it's, again, it would look exactly the same, but it's just for your pet parents. But every time our team has a conversation with a pet parent, we kind of highlight that conversation in their profile. So you can see the question that the pet parent has. You can see the response that our team provides. You have all of this visibility, which works really well because when we think about ourselves, it's like an extension of your organization. And we don't want you to feel in the dark. So you can kind of see all of what's happening, and it can be really helpful for like team members that potentially don't have a lot of experience with behavior, right? They have now this exposure to like, what are the recommendations, kind of seeing it live without having the time commitment of again, responding to the pet parents when these questions come up. But just wanted to show that to kind of, I guess, provide the whole context of kind of what's going on our end. But resource guarding of people, how do you recommend dealing with resource guarding of people and dogs? Or of people and dogs or dogs. So in terms of resource guarding, I'll send out, so we have like a bunch of different materials of people by dogs. Yeah. So it's kind of a more detailed recommendation. I'll put it in the deck in terms of a link out, kind of explore it. But I will say also that when questions come into our team, I'm not the person that typically answers the questions. All of our kind of behavioral consultants and trainers answer them. So I'll send you the link to talking about resource guarding, and then follow-up questions. I'll punt them over to our team as well. Any last questions from anyone?
I'm sorry the unmute button is not working for people, so they're not able to ask.
Oh yeah, no problem. I can see it in the
Why?
chat for sure. But yeah, I hope that y'all found this helpful. And again, I'll send out the deck, and it has a ton of different resources that are available that you can kind of use, either just to send them to pet parents or as the basis to kind of craft responses and whatnot on your end. But yeah, and if you have any questions afterwards, you'll have my email, so feel free to reach out with anything that comes up.
Thank you, Bailey.
Yeah, of course. All right, have a good rest of the day. All right, bye guys.
You as well.
See you. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.